Elam is the founder and CEO of A Voice for Men, an extensive organizational network for men's human rights advocacy and the first of its kind to host the International Conference on Men's Issues. An activist, psychologist, and fellow Texan, he's here today to give us his take on the state of men's rights as well as the movement itself.
I think if you take a look at most of the issues you just quoted, suicide rates, you can look at men's treatment in family courts, parental alienation, what happens, the fact that the suicide rate for men goes from 4 to 1 in normal times to 11 to 1 during the process of a divorce. What we find at the core of a lot of men's issues, and especially those that we would term as rights issues as they face in family courts and stuff, all come back to their interpersonal relationships with women, their boundaries or lack of boundaries, the what they do to be accepted by women, whether or not they screen women for their character, whether or not they're willing to let women go who are treating them badly. It involves a lot of personal accountability, which is unlike feminism. That's what I focus on in my work, is men's personal accountability for the fact that with their choices, they can prevent a lot of the damage this society will do to them. And to me, that starts with their interpersonal relationships with women.
What about the relationship between men and women throughout the ages, though? I mean, doesn't it typically revolve around the fact that women can bear children, and so, like, we protect the women and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, and if we want to apply a medieval attitude toward relationships today, that'll work out just fine. So women can have children. Women can also fly fighter bombers for the Air Force. They can be brain surgeons. They can be attorneys. They can change tires. They can hold their weight financially in a relationship in a world in which we expect and demand that women be given fair access to education and employment as they should be. But to rely on I think the biological mandates of life on the African savannah and trying to apply that to life now in relationships and say, well, what about babies? Doesn't work for me.
Whereabout did this kind of radical feminist idea come from, this whole rights for me but not for thee kind of thing? I mean, how is that justifiable?
Chivalry, and it's female entitlement, gynocentrism at the very core of it. And that also speaks to my work with men and what I believe is important for them. If men want a better standing and more adjusted, happier lives in this world, they need to ditch gynocentrism. It doesn't serve them. It doesn't really serve women either. It infantilizes them. It gives them a sense of entitlement and privilege, which leads to constant disappointment and frustration in life, because who could ever expect to, fulfill the demands of the average 24-year-old in this culture? It's an impossible goal. So what I think men need to do is that we need to get up to speed with the times. This is not 1600. It's, the 21st century. We all live in, or most all of us live in nice, safe, air-conditioned homes, climate-controlled. We have personal protection. We have police forces. There's not a monster at the door waiting to get in and eat the family. And women can put on their big girl panties and start acting like grown-ups, or men can ditch them, which is what I suggest very strongly, that that's their choice.
Are you MGTOW?
I'm in a 17-year committed relationship.
Oh, nice. Cool. You correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe A Voice for Men were actually the ones who put on the first conference?
Yes, I organized, I say I shouldn't say that because it involved a lot of people, but A Voice for Men, with me at the helm, more or less, organized the first conference.
What does A Voice for Men do exactly? For those out there who aren't familiar.
Oh, well, we organize conferences for one. Mainly, we produce a body of literature for men, and to the extent they're able to handle it, for women, about the very things you and I were just talking about. I'm a writer. I've just released a book on relationships for men and women. Um, and we counter the cultural narrative that tells us that men are the default predators of the world, that they're bad, that they're wrong, that women are emotionally superior. All the typical garbage spouted by feminists about men and women. We take that, break it down, deconstruct it, uh, turn it into a format that makes sense, critique it, and send it back to the public for consideration.
Have you been subject to like harassment?
I've been subject to death threats and harassment. I've been the subject of being called I'm a one-man hate group, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a pretty esteemed place in my life. I kind of like it. I've got a T-shirt to that effect.
I don't know what that means. That's a weird. That's a weird phrase.
It is a weird phrase, but the Southern Poverty Law Center has designated a voice for men, which is largely just a website run by me, as a hate group. I've been targeted by Time Magazine. I've been targeted viciously by BuzzFeed. I've had them spend a lot of effort trying to dig up dirt on me, making attacks on me, on my loved ones, on my family, and it's been going on for as long as I've been speaking up about these issues. When we organized the first conference in Detroit, it was originally scheduled to be at the Doubletree Hilton in downtown Detroit. There were, however, death threats levied at the hotel. The hotel was threatened that their guests and their employees would be shot if they allowed the conference to go on. So we ended up turning to a local VFW who happily hosted us. And of course, it came off without incident. It was a lot of hot air, but this is the environment that I work in. And it slowed down a bit. We're getting less hostility, a little less, and the narrative is changing. There's room to believe at this point that the world is more non-feminist than it is feminist, that the narrative has been changing, in part thanks to our work and to the work of a lot of other people. But it is still an uphill battle. Nobody wants to care about men as a group. We are still perceived to be the gender of privilege, the ones with all the power, even as I hear every day in my mailbox from men who are being destroyed in family courts and who are having their lives torn to pieces by false accusations. I get similar letters from men routinely now from prisons who say that they have been falsely accused and falsely imprisoned. But that's my world. That's what I work with.
Well, isn't there something to be said? It seems like as kind of the relationships or the relationship between men and women starts to break down more and more, it's like masculinity itself seems to be coming under attack and getting like common traits of masculinity that have typically defined men throughout the ages. They seem to be getting watered down, and also like sperm counts and birth rates in a lot of places are declining. Do you see this as like leading to somewhere that's going to be where it's able to be repaired at some point, or are we just kind of in a entropy, kind of a decline?
I think that it remains to be seen whether or not that the entropy can be stopped or reversed, or that things can be repaired. I know that they think that what is going on with a lot of the drop in testosterone levels and in sperm counts for men has to do with endocrine disruptors. I think there's physiological reasons for that, but it would be easy to, indulge in the conjecture that it has something to do with the cultural climate too. That traditional masculinity is being shamed and dismissed as toxic. Um, there's a lot going on right now. So you talk about the breaking down of the relationships between men and women. The relationship between men and women is broken. It's horribly broken. The divorce rate is astronomical. Marriage rates are declining. There is a great sense of distrust between men and women. And I lay all of this pretty much at the feet of feminism and of gynocentrism. Gynocentrism was a great deal when, you had to protect women from beasts that would eat them. They had to be protected so that they could stay alive to gestate and take care of children in early childhood. It was important during those times for men to sacrifice life and limb in order to keep women going. It's not so important anymore. Now it's become like the gorilla on the green, the 900-pound gorilla with a putter in his hand. A little bit of overkill. But there is a lot going on. I think the most we can hope for right now is to foster a subculture of men and women who want mutual valuing, equal valuing, and mutual respect for each other. That isn't the standard socially anymore. It's about what men owe women, what women feel like they're entitled to, and of course, that kind of insanity doesn't work.
What about like the push for artificial means of compensation, right? Like here in San Antonio, we have a place called the Dollhouse, and it's like they make sex dolls. There's been a lot of talk of like artificial wombs and things of this nature that would enable people to not have to physically embrace another. You know what I mean?
Well, it's understandable. I think it's unfortunate that that's how bad things have gotten, that we actually have human beings making a rational decision to turn to an inanimate object for some sort of sexual emotional gratification because they don't feel that the human being next to them is worth taking a risk on. It is to me staggering that is actually a rational choice. There's a part of me that wants to, scream about guys being losers doing that and talk about what a terrible setback this is for the human race, that we can't, replace people with a bag of silicone. But when I look at the experiences of men with modern women, I find it very difficult to argue with their rationale. They are behaving with unconscious wisdom, and it's a tragedy. It's unfortunate. It deeply saddens me, but it is what it is.
So where does masculinity actually stand now that the transgender debate is reaching such prominency? I mean, doesn't that kind of throw the whole definition into whack?
I'm going to give you an answer to that. It's going to sound like a smart-ass answer, but keep in mind it's not directed in a smart-ass way at you, but in a smart-ass way at the question. My masculinity is exactly where I fucking say it is. And I encourage all men to approach their masculinity in that fashion. One of the greatest things for men to overcome in this culture is the man up mantra, is other people telling them what the standard for masculinity is, what they have to reach for. And it's always just a way to control men. It's a way to shame and humiliate them. It's how we get them on the battlefield. It's how we get them on their knees before women with diamonds in their hands. It's how we get them to slave away 12, 14, 16 hours a day to bring money home to women who fucking cheat on them. This is what we do with men, is we shame them with masculinity. And what I tell men, nobody can define your masculinity but you, no trans activist, nobody. Your masculinity is yours, and if it's negotiable, then you're in the wrong. You're cheating yourself. Own your own masculinity, and tell anybody in the world that tries to tell you otherwise to go fuck themselves.
Well, so then what gives with the recently issued APA guidelines for men and boys? I mean, why is it that a female-dominated field is trying to come to determine what constitutes masculinity, and toxic masculinity at that?
There's been an ideological takeover of the entire mental health profession. It's rooted deeply in the APA. Before it was a new guidelines on masculinity, we've had Division 51 of the APA out there for the past 20 years, undermining men, coming up with terms like toxic masculinity, shaming men, humiliating men, telling them that their masculinity, unless it serves a feminist ideology, is wrong. And this is more of the same from them. It's how we came up with that Gillette commercial, with these ideologues posing as mental health professionals, out to help people, supposedly, but not actually harming people, sending a message that to men that their mental health is contingent on adopting an ideological worldview that sees men as bad. I mean, how messed up is that? It's absolutely messed up to even think about that. It's like saying, I want to start a branch of psychology called Republican therapy. How could I sell that? How could I do Trumpian analysis with people? So the Division 51 of the APA coming up with these hateful, and it's hateful ideology about men. This is what they're doing. And so the work I've done recently with Tom Golden, who's also, I don't know if you've talked to him, but he's an LCSW that will also be at the conference, and with Janice Fiamingo on Regarding Men, we've talked a lot about what's going on with the APA and with these sick therapists out there in the world pushing a hateful agenda and calling it mental health treatment.
That was Paul Elam, CEO and founder of A Voice for Men. You can check out their various activities and projects at their website through the link in the description. Also in the description is a link to tickets for the ICMI. I would urge anyone who is passionate about these issues and has the spare dolans to dish out to attend the event. It's sure to be a real bitchin' beach blast.